Do you think that, I guess, how do you think that 2016 has gone so far for the way that you're built as a candidate and that your campaign is built to handle everything that's been going on this year?
Yeah, no one would have predicted 2015 would have had this volatility for sure. But we have a strategy, just focus on slow, steady progress. Here in Iowa, what really matters is organization, and we're focused on it like a laser beam.
Is there a desire, though, or to correct some of the things that are said that are inflammatory? So, probably the one time we'll bring up Donald Trump today, but some of the things that Donald Trump says or Ben Carson says that are totally out of left field, specifically about 9/11, especially because that's tied to your brother. Is there a desire to kind of correct the record there and lash out against those things and kind of lead almost and say, well, now you've gone too far?
He's gone too far, and he's showing a lack of seriousness as being capable of being president. And that's the bigger issue is elections are about the future, not the past. But past is prologue. If you say the things you say, if you take all the incoming without a filter and you just regurgitate it back out, it doesn't show a seriousness in serious times. And so I do post up against this notion that candidates that just say things they know are not accurate aren't qualified, because this is a serious job. You're being commander-in-chief of the greatest military force in the world. You're going to send men and women in harm's way. You better do it with a sobriety that accompanies that office.
Do you think your numbers might be better in polls if this were something that resembled much more of a traditional campaign that we've seen, in 2008 and before that?
Look, I'm respectful of the fact that people are angry and really frustrated by the inaction in Washington. And I can tell them that I had 32 years in the private sector and 8 years as governor of the state of Florida. I'm not a Washington insider, but I know how to get things done. I've taken strategies and implemented them and improved the human condition in the state of Florida. So telling that story over time, I think, will resonate. But it's not supposed to be easy running for president, and it's a hard job. So I accept the conditions in which this campaign is going forward, and I do it with joy in my heart.
On that outsider streak, how is it hard, though, to kind of outrun your last name and outrun both your brother and your father, but then also at the same time embrace, what you've been able to learn from their presidencies?
There's a fascination about, my last name, for sure. And I'm proud of my brother and I'm proud of my dad. I love them dearly. But as I said, campaigns are about the future. They're really about what the lush green valley on the rocky, we have a rocky climb to make, and what does it look like if we fix a few big complex things? So my principal focus is on talking about ideas to allow Americans to rise up again. And I'm not going to abandon my heritage. It's a good one, and I'm proud of it.
Is there a need to defend it sometimes, though? You said in the debate that my brother kept us safe.
Yeah, I feel compelled to do that. I don't, just because I love them and I care about them. And when things are over the top or said, I'm going to be there to defend them for sure. As is other candidates, by the way. Mm-hmm. If you've seen the debates, people are kind of tired of hearkening back to the past and overstating whatever it was that took place. Look, every president, Democrat and Republican, have accomplishments, and they made mistakes. That's just the nature of the job. It's a tough job. And so the question is, have you learned from them? Have you learned from the successes and the mistakes, and can you focus on the future in a way that will allow our country to move up?
Moving forward to the Planned Parenthood shootings a few days ago. Obviously, those are horrific, and it seems like everyone's coming together on the idea that the shooter was deranged.
Yeah.
But is it dangerous, though, some of the things that the GOP candidates were saying about Planned Parenthood and the work that they do, that rhetoric gets into the mind of somebody who isn't all there, and they go off and they're inspired to do this kind of thing? Not saying that he's inspired by the GOP, but by putting all those things out there on the news and on national TV, is there a chance that certain candidates can pollute the waters in that way?
No, I don't blame the candidates. I think people have been within the realm of decency on this. Look, Planned Parenthood was caught selling body parts of aborted babies. It's if you're talking about inciting activity, that's a pretty horrible thing. And this guy's deranged. That's the bottom line, is that he was inspired because of his sickness. And what we need to figure out is, how do we intervene in people's lives before they act on their derangement in a way that kills innocent people. It's a tragedy, and it's much more visible now because we live in this news cycle that is perpetual, and there's so many forms of medium that people can access. But it breaks my heart to think that people that were just living their lives, a police officer getting shot, and others, innocent people aren't deserving of that kind of result for sure.
You had the question today about both gun reform that allows hunters to do their thing.
That's a great question.
It was pretty interesting in that sense. But what do you think will get the nation and politicians to a point where that kind of reform does come around, where something that really does move the needle but doesn't overstep is put in place? Well,
that's the problem with Washington today, is that the left says, well, we need to register guns, we need to do this and that, and the net effect is that law-abiding gun owners' rights are going to be stopped, and so the right, correctly so, pushes back. And where there is common ground, I think, is figuring out how to identify people before they get to the point where they feel compelled to kill people. And that requires a new approach to mental illness and mental health, and how you balance privacy rights with people that are spiraling out of control. And Washington needs a new leader to be able to, at least on the things where there is common ground, to forge consensus, figure out the best way to do it, and move on, fix things and move on. We're not doing that right now.
Sure. Under the Syrian refugee crisis. You said a few weeks ago about maybe taking in refugees that are Christian or prove that they're Christian. Is there a danger in creating a dangerous kind of other class where you ostracize people who are, just because of their religion, who are looking for a safer place to live?
Well, first of all, the interesting thing is that the screening process in the law for how that's to take place requires a religious test. So what I was suggesting is done each and every day. It is not discriminating against Muslims to suggest that Christians have no place to go. A Christian can't go to a refugee camp full of Muslims. It's not safe. A Christian will be beheaded based on their faith. A Christian will be enslaved, or a Yazidi. Religious minorities in the Middle East have no place to go. And I think we're duty bound to recognize that and show some compassion for people, but for their faith, could live a productive life. But because they're Christians, they're being slaughtered. That's not to say that the United States doesn't have a role to play to provide support for innocent refugees that are Muslim. But I think the best way to do that is to create safe zones in Syria. Ultimately, people don't want to be uprooted. They want to stay in their communities, but they need to do so in a safe and secure way.
How does this kind of particular subject balance the idea of keeping the United States safe with the idea of being a melting pot and welcoming people in, if they do want to come here, or working with them within the Middle East?
Well, we have this unique case of where Islamic terrorists have realized that there is a vulnerability. Our freedom is our vulnerability, and they attack it in all sorts of ways. They attack it through the internet. They attack it because of freedom of movement, and they attack it in the case of Europe, with embedding in large numbers of refugees that are migrating to France and other countries. And so we have to be vigilant. It's not nothing is either or. It's always a balance. And I think we can protect our freedoms and protect our immigrant heritage by making sure that legal immigration is protected, but illegal immigration and clearly threats of terror have to be dealt with in a completely different way.
Do you think the GOP discussion on topics like this, whether it was immigration from the South before this or immigration from Syria now in the Middle East, has moved to a point that's bordering on xenophobic, if in some cases it's not already there?
For most of the candidates, no. I think most of the candidates have a reasonable view, but Trump is preying on people's anger and fear without a solution. He's not a serious candidate in that regard. He doesn't offer serious proposals. He knows exactly what he's doing. And frankly, he's playing the press like a Stradivarius violin. I mean, he totally gets how the press, by saying the outrageous thing, the press will cover him more, and this is where he gets his energy. The net effect, though, is that there's no solving of a problem. And we have to solve how we control our border, and we have to deal with the Syrian refugee crisis in a proper way. And I'm the only candidate actually prior to the Paris shootings that actually laid out a strategy. I did it at the Reagan Library. And it's a comprehensive one that requires American leadership.
Just two more for you then. Turning to Syria and dealing with the al-Assad regime, is this a chance to partner with Vladimir Putin? And is this a way that maybe we can find a way, if not common ground and a little bit of trust, to bring those two kind of old superpowers together?
It could be if the United States led, but from our position of weakness, Russia senses a weakness and is exploiting their own national interest in a very direct and open way, and quite effectively, I think. So we need to lead and be stronger. And secondly, Russia would have to abandon the Assad regime for this to be effective. They would have to be part of a solution to take Assad out. And the remnants of the Syrian Free Army, some version of that with the support of the Arab League, with Europe, and led by the United States, with Russia as a partner theoretically, could work, but that's not Russia's interest. You look at the number of sorties that Russia is doing, they're not attacking ISIS. They're propping up the Assad regime, and that's their intention. They want to have a military presence in Syria, which they've strengthened now because of our lack of leadership, and they want to be back in the game in the Middle East. They want to be a player, and they're achieving their objective while we pull back.
Just to follow to that, how is that different in a Bush presidency then?
Well, I think we need to create a strategy that doesn't just talk about dealing with ISIS, but acts on it, a no-fly zone, which the Obama administration is concerned because that would create conflict with Russia. Well, they should be worried about creating conflict with us. If you start with that premise, you have a different approach. Safe zones, a serious effort to train and arm an army, to have much greater intelligence capabilities on the ground, both in Syria and Iraq. No-fly zones and safe zones in Syria, and then in Iraq, a totally different approach that engages with the Iraqi military, with the Kurds, and with the Sunni tribal leaders. We could get back in the game, and in that environment, then talking to Russia would have a dramatically different result.
In Lynn County, we have Joni Scudder, who's part of the Lynn County Republicans.
She is a doll.
Well, I was going to say, in a place like Iowa, where you have caucuses and grassroots and organization is a big deal, how does someone like that, one individual person who everybody knows in town, change something like not only for your campaign, but the campaign she supported in the past?
It matters because she spends her whole waking hours making calls to people and sharing her support for my candidacy. I mean, she is a superstar, and there are many others as well. And you can't poll that, you really can't. That energy and that enthusiasm is really it's special, and it's Iowa. It's just totally unique to Iowa. The caucus it's like going to a caucus is like being the pig in the breakfast experience, not the chicken. You got to be all in, and that's what Joni is. She's all in.
Perfect. Governor, I appreciate it. Thanks so much.
What a nice shout out for her.
Yeah.